Hello and welcome to the Dr. Aya Safi podcast. Today, again, I'm absolutely delighted to have Dr. Irfan Khawaja for the second time. And as it is the time of that year, Ramadan is around the corner. And as Dr. Irfan has produced a guide for PE, physical education, and physical activity for schools, and could be implemented in other organizations as well. We'll hear from Irfan in a minute. So, Irfan, thank you for joining me once again. Um, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good. Thank you. Yeah, it's come around quickly. Ramadan's just starting in a few days, so yeah, I think it's exciting. Best part of the year.
Absolutely. I think I remember last year when you produced the PE and physical activity guideline during Ramadan. You were the first guest which we launched this podcast, the Dr. Safi podcast with, and now you are here again with us. It's absolutely a pleasure to have you.
Yeah, I think surely I should be getting some sort of reward on this, some percentage or something like that. The first one, I'd like to say a lot of it was part of the success of the first one, and that's where it snowballed from. But no, congratulations
Absolutely.
to you.
Yeah, well,
Congratulations to you.
absolutely.
That's excellent work. Clearly very popular. So keep it going, my brother. Keep it going.
Thank you. Well, we just need that people like of you who gives us their time and their expertise, and I hope this episode reached you as wider population as possible so people can benefit. So we appreciate that. Um, Irfan, let me start with, if you don't mind providing some sort of summary of the guide. Like, why do we need that particular PE and physical activity guide during Ramadan? What is it? And if you don't mind kind of shedding some light and for our viewers, especially those who haven't heard about it before, or maybe they haven't watched the last episode, if you can provide some summary for us.
Sure. Okay. So first of all, I think it's important for us to understand what Ramadan is and what's it all about, because there'll be some people who have come from a Muslim background and some from a non-Muslim background who may have heard of Ramadan but may not know a lot about it. I'm aware that there's some people out there who may feel a little bit uncomfortable asking
Mhm.
questions about Ramadan and about what it is, and they don't have the confidence perhaps to speak to other Muslims to ask those questions because they don't want to offend them. And
Right.
that's understandable. I totally understand that. That's not a problem at all. But I think it's also very important to make sure that we, as those who are working in education and beyond education, and I'll come to that a little bit later, we have a document, a hard document, that we can use as formal guidance to those who are working within schools, universities, colleges, even in places of worship and beyond, that they have something that is crystal clear explaining what Ramadan is and what is the best practice for those who are teaching and what is the best practice for those who are students as well.
Right.
And this goes from the student level all the way up to head teacher and governance level and senior management level, whether that's in universities, college, schools, etc. It covers the whole span of education. Now, I think one of the reasons why this guidance was particularly popular was because people could ask other Muslim colleagues in their place of work, what do I do? And they would have an answer that was definitive to what that person's opinion was, and that was
Right.
subjective. Now, that opinion was not necessarily the correct guidance. That was not necessarily the correct instruction according to what Sharia law instructs us as Muslims. It was based on their opinion.
Right.
And I had many phone calls, conversations from different parents, different schools, different university colleagues who were saying, this is what students are saying to us. We're not sure and we're not comfortable and we're not confident. So we've asked another Muslim colleague, and this advice from a Muslim colleague differs from another school.
Right.
So who do we believe? So there was a real call for help from the education workforce on something that could be very objective, very clear cut, and that everybody followed nationally. This is the correct guidance that has been issued. And this is not just me writing my thoughts or my opinions here. This has been written in association with the Muslim Council of Britain. This has been written and published by the Association for Physical Education.
Right.
Has also been written in collaboration with the Youth Sports Trust and the Chartered Institute of the Management of Sport and Physical Activity. So there's a real traction behind the document, and everybody is in unity as we wrote this, and they really supported me very strongly to make sure that it was accurate from an Islamic perspective.
Right.
And that's where the Muslim Council of Britain came in, and it was a rigorous and thorough check of making sure that my interpretation was accurate, because if they're going to stamp it, then they need to make sure that they are confident in the document itself. And then also from an educational perspective, the National Subject Lead, the Association for PE, they had to be sure that the guidance that I was given as a PE teacher myself, to make sure that the guidance was safe for those who are working in education. And also just to note that this is I didn't realize until quite recently how powerful the document is. The document is there for schools to follow and guide them through best practice and safe practice. And should a school choose not to follow it, and God forbid something were to happen, and let's say the school was taken through to court for legal proceedings, the guidance forms legislation.
Right.
And if it went to tribunal, the school would therefore be liable and would be questioned as to why did they not follow the guidance which has been issued for schools. So it is not
now,
a document.
Yeah, so my understanding from that is, so the schools are some sort of now liable to adapt this guideline that has been produced?
Yeah, so if something were to go wrong and they didn't use the guidance and adapt their approach during Ramadan, and let's say there was an accident, or someone fell ill, or something serious happened, and there was a claim against the school, if it were to go through and legal proceedings were to go through, the school would be liable if they did not follow it. So it's in the school's best interest. It's in the school's best interest to make sure that they are following the guidance that is available, because it does form legislation against them if they don't follow it.
And Irfan, you mentioned about that you had to kind of be cautious in terms of making sure that the sports that you recommended for during Ramadan are safe for the students. I know your expertise within this subject. You worked in schools and university for a long time, and you are a real expert in this subject. But just for our viewers again, how did you determine what sport is best suited for who? For example, in this case, we have people of a disability, we have males, females, different sports, and so on. So what sports would be best suited for who, and how did you determine that?
Okay, so in terms of determining the sports or determining the activities, the first thing that I turn to is I look at the national curriculum, because we have a duty of care and a duty as teachers to make sure that we are delivering the activities that need to be delivered as part of their national curriculum. So that informs the activities that we teach. Now, the expertise, and not just myself, there's thousands of fantastic teachers out there up and down the country. They are trained in modifying their activities accordingly, and that can be and some of the best practice that I've often showcased, schools that use the student voice to dictate and determine what activities they want delivered and what activities they want to engage in during the month of Ramadan. The best schools out there, they plan for Ramadan back in September, in the start of the academic year. They don't leave it till last minute and then they say, oh, Ramadan's next week, we need to start thinking about our activities. They've actually looked at where Ramadan falls in the calendar, in their academic calendar, and then they plan accordingly, and they think, okay, Ramadan's going to fall end of February, beginning of March. These are the activities that we had planned. However, let's talk to the students. How do they feel about doing these activities during Ramadan? And I think it's quite common sense to reduce the intensity of the activities during Ramadan, and perhaps do more skill-based activities and technical work for physical activity during Ramadan, and your higher intensity activities perhaps let that fall outside of the holy month.
Yeah, I think that's a good summary there. Thank you for that. And I think you talked about the planning aspect of the schools that can do before the Ramadan, and one of the things that's been also provided in your guide is the Ramadan cycle every year where you fall. So that kind of gives them an idea of which year you want
Yeah.
the next 10, 15 years, for example, and where Ramadan will fall and how will that impact because of the climate, the summer, the winter, the duration. So I think that the guide really helps with that. I also like the planning aspect of the school because if you leave anything to the last minute, it can kind of mistakes could be made and then not everybody is well accommodated. Last year, when we talked about the guide, it was relatively new, but we've already seen the success of it, given the conference that was delivered, which I also presented our research in there, and also discussed during that conference when we had the discussion in a group. Many PE teachers or some of the head of the schools or other individuals that attended the conference, they were saying we didn't know about this. This
Mm,
is really eye opener, which is great to hear, to be honest.
mm,
But also how the media went like after you and wanted to know more about this, which kind of received a national outreach. The guide already, and then obviously the Youth Sport Trust of the FP. And the others that the support that you received, and I think you went to the parliament and pitched it there as well.
yeah.
Now, Ramadan is approaching again next week. Again, you're super busy with all the interviews and going out. And every time I see you've done a conference here or you've done a workshop here, different universities, different colleges, schools, different other educational settings. So far, as it's getting to the first anniversary of this guide, what kind of feedback and adaptation have you seen from schools and also other educational institutions regarding this guide?
So far, we're looking at approximately 3,000 schools nationally who
Right.
have implemented the guidance. They've uptaken them and
That's a
implemented it,
huge success. Well done. Well
which is
done.
it's a blessing, really. And I think that is just really answering the call for schools. This is something that schools have been crying out for, and it's something that they have absolute faith in now, because it's very easy for me and you to be sat here saying, okay, well, this is what you say, this is what you do, this is how we teach, this is how you modify the activities, this is what the Islamic teachings are. But
Yeah.
there are thousands of non-Muslim teachers out there who are facing issues when it comes to fasting students during Ramadan coming to PE. And it's not just PE, it's coming to school, full stop. And this
Yeah.
is my next step. I wrote the guidance for PE and physical activity, but it has traveled so quickly to the wider curriculum, and also the public sector as well, public services, the NHS, the police force, the fire
Right.
service.
Right.
So many other people who are crying out, saying, "Look, you've written this for physical education. We have parts of our job that are practical in nature. Even if people are stacking shelves in a supermarket, it's a practical nature of a job. And if they are fasting whilst they're stacking shelves, what's the guidance for them?
Yeah.
Legally, where do they stand if something were to happen?" So again, this guidance is now being transformed and being applied into many different workplaces. So yeah, 3,000 schools nationally. However, it's actually now looking at the bigger picture across the country to see, outside of schools, what's the picture, what's the climate look like now, how are they implementing the guidance, and what's the next step, what's the need for the next step for this guidance, where do I go with it next.
Yeah. I'm definitely. I'll be asking some of those questions later on. But do 3,000 schools have adopted this guide? Irfan?
They've implemented it, yeah, so they
Nice.
now are aware of it, so that's heads of department, they now share that across. their clusters of schools, their academies. There was a conference in Sheffield recently that I presented at and showcased it there. They've also shared that guidance across their pyramid of schools that they have in their partnership. So it really is kind of taking off, and I've just been invited again back up to an iftar event up there, which is very kind of them to again promote the work, promote the guidelines of it, and again, it's just supporting them through, because you can never know too much about it. There's so many different things
Yeah.
that come up every year, and even now this year, I've got new questions that have been asked over the last 12 months, and I can share some of those with you.
And I think you talked about the guidelines. So many non-Muslim PE teachers can benefit from this, but I think also so many Muslim teachers, PE teachers, can also benefit from this guide, because when I was a PE teacher in school, I'll be honest with you, we didn't know much aspects from the Islamic side of it. It was just
Yeah. Probably just uploading, I think. No, I'm all good. Yeah, can you hear me? I've still got good signal. Yeah, just loading.
yeah, I can hear you now. Yeah, that's
That's
fine.
fine.
Whatever we discuss, it gets stored. It's fine.
Sure.
So yeah, so I mean, so many Muslims teachers can also benefit from this guide, because if someone is from the Muslim faith, they don't necessarily understand the practical side of the things. For example, in PE, but given that almost or over 3,000 schools are considering adapting this guide, it shows the greater need for it. Um, could you share any specific success stories where some of these schools have implemented the guideline, and then any positive impact it had on their Muslim students or staff, maybe for the past year? Or is there any measurement that you measured, any success rate, any of the impact that it has made so far?
Yeah, I think the best way to look at the impact with this particular guidance is looking at case studies and looking at scenarios, that real life scenarios that have happened in the last 12 months. And I'll share a couple with you. So there was a school in Derby recently, and there was a PE member of staff who contacted me, and I think this member of staff was a young early career teacher, ECT. They just recently qualified over the last year or two, and this guidance was written for Ramadan,
Right.
which was our holy month for fasting, and not just fasting. It's also spiritually cleansing us to make sure that we are good people and humanitarian people. Now, this particular member of staff was facing issues with a student or a group of students who were fasting, but not during Ramadan, because of course they chose to fast outside of Ramadan, maybe
Right.
1
Okay.
or 2 days a week.
Quite common. Yeah.
Yeah, and best practice how to manage that, because again, from a school policy perspective, the school had only planned to adapt activities during Ramadan. They hadn't planned to adapt activities for the rest of the year or for the rest of the term.
Yeah.
So the advice was, what do they do on this? And ultimately, I returned back to the teacher and I said, your main duty is to deliver your national curriculum. And if you've got 1 or 2 students in your class who are fasting for religious reasons, they are entitled to do so. So you modify your activities accordingly. Now, even though you have not planned for it because you've only focused on the Ramadan month of the academic year, perhaps it's good practice in your school, because I imagine this is not going to be an isolated incident. Perhaps it's good school practice for you to maybe look at the wider school population, all of the students, and just try and gauge, right, how many students are likely of your school population to be fasting during the week, during the term. Now, I think we have to remember that no Muslim can use Ramadan as an excuse not to engage in PE, physical activity, or sport. This is not okay, sir, I'm not getting changed today because I'm fasting. That is not the purpose, and that is not a good enough reason.
Yeah.
In fact, it's frowned upon. That's the opposite of what Ramadan's about being a good person, being honest. There's nothing directed in the Sharia law that indicates that you should not engage in physical activity. So students and pupils in schools, college, university, they should not be using that as an excuse not to engage in your subject. Just in the same way that they wouldn't use it as an excuse not to engage in maths, English, science, geography, French, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Not at all. You carry on as per normal. And that is the essence of it. Ramadan encourages Muslims to carry on with their daily life as per normal. No need to try and ask people to make modifications for them. However, for best practice for those working in education, modifying your activities in a sympathetic way, right, would mean that at least they are accessing your learning better than if you carried on with these high intensity activities. So that was the first case study of something that came through just very, very recently, a couple of weeks ago. The second one, which is very interesting, was there's a school that's delivering swimming. And swimming is always very topical, very, very topical for Ramadan. Because if we are sat here and me and you are just having a chat and I'm fasting and I have a drink of water and I forgot that I'm fasting, my intention was to carry on with my fast. I didn't mean to break my fast.
Yeah.
So according to Islam and according to the Sharia law for Ramadan, if you accidentally take a drink of water because it was an accident, the intention was not to, it was still clean, you haven't broken your fast. You can carry on for the day. Yeah. Now, the school is teaching swimming, and the directive is that if you are swimming and your intention is to go swimming, and you know that if you enter a swimming pool, you are putting yourself at high risk of breaking your fast because you are submerging yourself in water. You know that there's going to be a very, very high chance that water is going to enter your mouth, but you still carry on doing so. Should water enter the mouth, right, during a swimming lesson, because the intention was for that person to go swimming in the first place, the fast is then broken. Now, I had a very interesting conversation with, as a bit of a follow-up to this, saying, well, what happens if someone jumps in a lake or jumps in the canal, on the way home from school or on the way home from work and water goes in their mouth? And then I said, well, is the intention for them to, let's say they fell in the canal, he says, is the intention them to fall in the canal? Did they do that on purpose? No, they didn't. Well, then it's an accident, isn't it? Yeah, because they never wanted to go in the canal in the first place. Yeah. The swimming pool, the intention was to get in the swimming pool. So the intention is that you want to go in there. The canal, you don't want to go in there. However, from an educational perspective, the guidance is, what can you do to mitigate the chance of the water entering the mouth? And that's where you do a lot of work on things like backstroke, so the face is not submerged, using floats or those noodles just to kind of keep the body up and their face out the water. You can work on their leg kicks, anything like that. They're still engaging in the activities in the curriculum, but they're still managing to keep their fast. Of course, my first advice for this particular school was, if you can avoid swimming during Ramadan, then let's do that, because that just alleviates all of those problems in this place. However, if that is the only time of the year that you can book the swimming pool, for example, then okay, fine, go ahead, do it, but just be aware of what the implications are.
Yeah. And I think that's a good advice, especially giving that alternatives. You can still swim. but in a modifiable way. You can still fast as well. But yeah, definitely, I think this is why this guideline is so important, I think. Let me ask you this question.
Mm.
Irfan, I have spoken to some of the wider academics across institutions because this guide has reached, nationally has reached, I think, lots of people.
Mm.
And when I spoke to some academics, or some of them contacted me because of the last episodes that we have had. Some people raised some questions and said some schools may use this guide as a tool of a weapon, or as a weaponized tool to not encourage but to force students to participate in PE sessions. Now, I know you will definitely have a justification for this, but what I did say to them, the kids or pupils in school should be participating in PE regardless if this guide exists or not, because it's a core subject. And the Ramadan is not an excuse for them not to, given that the point of month of Ramadan is that you got to be more resilient, alert, still doing your daily activities as normal. Yes, for whatever reason, and if a child hadn't had food or drank uh, or water for a long period of time, yes, they may be a bit weak, attention may reduce, and then the guide will give the teacher some sort of guidance, say, okay, why not modify it? Like the example you gave about the swimming, and the backtrack, for example, you can still fast, you can still swim, but do it alternatively. Given that examples that some academics have not large, but maybe a handful, one or two, three, that may have raised these questions. Um, how would you respond to that? And have you noticed so far any unexpected challenge, or learning points that have emerged from the schools, 3,000 schools, for example, that's adapting this guideline? Have they mentioned anything like, what, we adapted this and now we're using it as a challenge or as a weapon tool
Mm.
for the kids, or any parents that have ever contacted you or anything of that sort? Yeah. So, and how did, if they've raised, I know there's like three different questions, but I'm happy to repeat again. But how did that kind of shaped your inside thinking of the guidelines?
Sure. Okay. So if they yeah if a to say that a school could use the guidance to weaponize um uh to be used to weaponize against children during Ramadan, for me that is the biggest load of rubbish I have
Right.
ever heard. Biggest load of rubbish I have ever heard, and that clearly shows just how out of touch um, these people are, and the lack of faith that they have in those teachers within the school. That is not what the guidance is. That is not what the guidance portrays. That is not what the guidance is designed to do. The guidance is there as a supporting mechanism. It is
Agree.
called guidance for a reason. It
Yeah.
is not called a weaponizing document, right? It is called guidance. The clue is in the title, right?
Absolutely. And
So,
Irfan, and it's been endorsed by the Muslim Council, um, and FP, who are the people in charge of the curriculum for PE, like the experts there, for example. The Youth Sport Trust is very, you know,
yeah.
much happy about it, and they've endorsed it there as well. Um, and yeah, I found that comment quite shocking, but carry on with it. Yes, please.
So let's be very clear. The Association for PE, they are our national subject lead.
Yeah.
They published the guidance. Now, I ask you the question, do you honestly think that the national subject lead would endorse and publish a paper that could be interpreted as weaponizing against children in schools? It has been written and endorsed by the Muslim Council of Britain,
Yeah.
been supported by the Youth Sports Trust and the Chartered Institute for the Management of Sport and Physical Activity. So to have an argument, which is a very poor argument, to say it can be used to weaponize against children in schools, just shows how out of touch people are and how they clearly have not understood the objective of what the guidance is and what it's there for. The second thing is, if there is, a school somewhere in the country, and I hope this isn't the case,
Right.
and they are, let's say, not using the guidance or not following the guidance, or they are saying this is what the guidance says, and you have to, let's say, you need to drink because you need to drink some water because you need to break your fast. You look unwell and you have to do as I say, and they're trying to force a child to drink water. Well, the guidance does not encourage that to be forced. The guidance advises schools to take a duty of care and contact the parents, speak to the student, and then just advise them, look, it is advisable to terminate the fast because you look unwell. You can make up for that fast at the end of Ramadan, so that's not a problem. And we've contacted your parents who also are supporting this situation as well. So schools should not be forcing children to break their fast just because this guidance has now come to fruition. But that argument on weaponizing is quite frankly a very isolated argument. I've not heard from anyone else nationally about this. And all I can say is I think the vast majority of schools who I've worked with nationally on this have been incredibly supportive of it.
Yeah.
They've understood it wholeheartedly. They've understood it comprehensively. And if there's been any follow-up questions, they contact me directly. And I go through it with them on a one-to-one basis. So, yeah, that's
I think the stats speaks there for the success, isn't it? Like over 3,000 schools are endorsing it, for example, or looking into adapting it in one way or the other. So much media attention it has grasped for the last year or so. So many universities are looking into it, and you're going around and promoting it. There is a greater addition or contribution to the EDI side of that as well, like the equality, diversity, inclusion, not just within the education sector, but more broadly within the communities as well. And the reason I kind of posed that side of like the weaponizing side of it, because of it has emerged from the conversation that I have held with some individual academics. I think we could kind of draw on that there could be a hating issue, like, and haters are going to hate regardless of what you produced and so on, and people are prejudiced and they'll have their perspectives on things or about you or me or anybody else. But generally speaking, the way the guideline has been endorsed by so many organizations, by media, by schools, by head teachers, I mean, it speaks for the not just only the success of it, but it speaks like how much this guideline was needed. You know, why didn't and some other experts talked or spoke about it or produced it? So hence you done it, like well done and fair play. I think it's a great tool. And so throughout this 1 year almost, have you had any challenges regarding this guideline? And if yes, did you amend anything or anything? Or how did that shape your thinking? Maybe the version number 2 for this guideline?
Yeah, so I think there's been a couple of things that have come through, and as I said, largely very, very positive. Even the university that I attended as a undergraduate, which was Newman University in Birmingham.
Same, yeah.
And my there were some colleagues there who teach on the teacher training courses there, who were thrilled to see this guidance come through. Sent me a message saying that they've sent a copy out to every single one of their training teachers when they go out on placement, and they were over the moon to receive this. And that was at Newman in Birmingham, Newman University. And I remember Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Okay.
Yeah. So sorry. Yeah.
So I
Carry on
was
from
just
where you left. I'll pick it up.
yeah, I was just saying that there were some colleagues, some colleagues at Birmingham Newman University,
Right.
and they contacted me when it came out, and they were desperate to get this out to all of their trainee teachers as they were going out on placement because it was so needed, and it was something that they could rely on and depend on, and that was really reassuring. But there was one, if you say about challenges, or I wouldn't say it was necessarily a challenge. I'd probably say it was a genuine question from a member of staff, and the question was, um, there were some students who were upset or anxious that if they listened to music, it would break the fast.
Right.
And I asked, where has this come from? And what had happened was within some of the schools at lunchtime or at break time, particularly um, if it was raining outside, if it was wet break or wet lunchtime, the children or the students have to go into their classrooms.
Right.
And sometimes they might put on some music, they might play board games, they might do some silent reading or whatever they want to do. And there was I think some teaching assistants or some lunchtime supervisors who would say, "Oh well, you can't listen to music during Ramadan, otherwise your fast is broken." And the students were getting scared, thinking, "Well, hang on, Miss has said or Sir has said that there's music on in the classroom. That means my fast is broken." And you feel for the children because they can't eat anything at lunchtime, so
Yeah.
can't really, they're low on energy. Then they're stuck in the classroom that they're stuck in all day. They can't go anywhere. And now they're being threatened by some members of staff to say, well, if the music's on, your fast is broken. Is that true? So this was a very good question. And number one, I asked, who is giving this advice?
Right.
Who is giving this information to the students? And where have they got this from? That's the first question that I asked the head teacher. Where
Mhm.
have they got this information from? The source. And then I addressed the question afterwards. Now, when I explain, so does that mean, let's say, for example, if they go to do their shopping in the supermarket after school for iftar to break their fast in the evening, and there's music on in the supermarket, which there often is, does that mean that you've broken your fast because you've listened to music in the supermarket? Does that mean that you have, let's say, a radio on when you go to the gym in the background? Because some people go to the gym after school or after work and they hear music just, in the background. Does that mean that they've broken their fast? Well, actually, no. There's nothing in Sharia law, there's no directive that says listening to music is going to break your fast. However, it has encouraged you to think about your spirituality during the month.
Right.
And if there's, let's say, music that is, let's say, around the Quran, the Hadith, so looking at
Like Nasheed, for example.
Nasheed, again, these are examples of music that is related to your spirituality, related to your faith, to strengthen your faith. So again, the argument doesn't stand. You know, yeah, there may be music in the background, but don't use that as to threaten schools or children that, okay, there's music on, no, you can't listen to it, otherwise you're breaking your fast. No, that's not true at all.
Students, I mean, music is obviously a completely different
Mm.
topic to what we're discussing, but were they just putting on in the classroom for them just to listen to, or were they just putting on the AirPods and listening to music and that type of lyrics and everything? Because
Mm.
Ramadan, it's Islamically, it's a month where we have to adapt a new approach, a better positive approach, for example. Um, and listening to certain lyrics or certain types of rapping or etc.
Mm.
Like I'm certainly not an expert on that side, but it might not invalidate the fast, but it's strongly discouraged to stay away from it. And as you say, to focus more on reflection, nasheed could definitely be, or maybe a talk. They could listen to a talk of a motivational speaker, an Islamic, like the likes of Mufti Ismail Mink or Ustad Noman Ali Khan, for example, and many others, which they can kind of benefit from and reflect what Ramadan is and so on. So yeah, definitely. I mean, there are different ways I think we can approach the subjects matters uh, that benefits the wider community, especially kids at school.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
so yeah, mhm,
I think the point is you can't just make a blanket comment statement saying
absolutely.
you cannot say no music, because there's some music that would be culturally and religiously appropriate. I agree that if you the types of lyrics need to be appropriate if there are lyrics at all. I think making sure that we remember that Ramadan is a month of spiritually cleansing ourselves to make sure that we are, as we say, closeness to God, or taqwa in Arabic,
Yeah,
making sure that we are as spiritually close to God as
that's
possible.
conscious. Yeah,
And therefore, I think we need to be mindful of that. But I think again, it was a question that came from a school, and it was again, and actually, after doing a little bit more research, the source of this information was a lunchtime supervisor, and it was their opinion. It was not from any
right, right,
scholar
right.
or imam or from anyone at all. It was just somebody's opinion, and that's what they were going around the school saying, and it got the staff quite confused and quite concerned. And naturally, the children were confused, saying, "Well, Mrs. said this, and that means that you've broken your fast." And the head teacher was getting complaints.
Yeah, I agree with you. Like sometimes my nieces and nephews they come home and they say things, or my sir said this, or my miss said this. And you're thinking, okay, fine, but that's not entirely accurate. So I agree with you on that side that there has to be some sort of guidance on pretty much everything that matters to us in our lives and communities as well. That's why now I think the education sector is looking into more decolonized curriculum side of it. And this guidance, I think, one of the ways that's going to decolonize the curriculum of PE, or if it hasn't already done so.
Mm.
Um, on the music side, um, I would strongly discourage anybody during Ramadan to refrain from it. Um, I don't have much knowledge on that side, but yeah, so definitely, because Ramadan is one of the months where we should be focusing more on stuff. But Nasheed, maybe, like you and I both, I think, will agree on that. Um, but if I'm coming to back to our guidance, for example, since our last conversation, um, almost again coming to a year. We did talk about, and there were elements where you had the plan that what this guideline could extend to other or settings as well, organizations, and you talked about it at the beginning as well. Have you received any request, or is there any plan of expanding these guidelines to other settings, such as could be sports clubs, could be community organizations, could be workplaces, where most of my research comes in as well? Any plan, any request so far?
Yeah, so plenty of requests. I think the key issue is time.
Yeah,
So the requests now are beyond education. So as I touched on earlier, there's things like the NHS, who if you can just imagine, you've got midwives, nurses, doctors who are working
yeah,
24/7 around the clock, and just spare a thought for those who work night shifts, those who are working and fasting during the day, and then have to work during the night during Ramadan. A very complex scenario, a very complex position to advise on here, because they are not eating or drinking during the day. They're going to have to try and sleep during the day, and then they are going to have to work during the night. So they're going against their body clock anyway. Ramadan, one of the hardest things is the broken sleep. If you're going to wake up for your meal in the morning for iftar, and then you have to do your full day's work and then come home, then after you've prayed, after you've broken your fast to iftar, then you pray, and then you catch up on your rest then.
Yeah.
Imagine not being able to catch up on your rest and then going to have to work, and those in hospitals will be working some crazy hours, very high intense hours, and some very difficult, complex situations, particularly when you've got your patients and their care is in your hands, so you cannot afford to make any mistakes. How can we guide them? How can we make sure that there is something there to make sure that, senior management teams within hospitals, senior doctors, they are aware of the workload of nurses, doctors, medical experts, to make sure that they are safely practicing what they need to do. That's from their perspective. Paramedics who are working around the clock as well. You've also got those who are working in the police and the fire service, who put themselves in very dangerous positions, who again, their hours don't stop between 9 and 5. They're working around the clock. Again, there's a high percentage of Muslims who are working within those in the public services. So we need to look at that. That's definitely an avenue to explore. And then the next one that you mentioned was the workplace. So this covers everybody, really covers everybody, even if that's office work, to those working within restaurants when they can't eat or drink, but they're still serving food. I mean, how is that? How does that feel? Those who are chefs, who are cooking, those who are working in supermarkets and they are serving others, and they are maybe, doing some heavy lifting if they're loading, unloading, and then stacking, etc. That physical movement, again, that's something that needs to be looked at and they need to be guided on, because obviously we know nowadays many supermarkets are open, if not 24 hours, they're open, till very late in the evening.
Yeah.
And if they've got members of staff who are fasting, they need to break their fast and they need to recover on their energy levels. What shift patterns do they work? What workload do you give them as a senior member of staff or as a line manager? How do you manage them? So that's probably the next direction now. Yeah.
Right. And based on any feedback that you have received thus far, and the plan that you have outlined, what areas do you think that may need more attention or clarifications in the guideline that has already made so much impact?
I think workload, and also looking at workload from a managerial perspective. But I think if we look at the understanding of what Ramadan is, there's so many people out there. And I often, whenever I'm presenting at conferences or webinars or any sessions or seminars I deliver, I often do a little quiz just to kind of get a baseline knowledge. And it is remarkable the number of people who do not confidently or comprehensively understand what Ramadan is. What does it mean?
Yeah.
What's the essence of it? And I think many organizations nationally, there is a lack of understanding of what it is. And I think had all these organizations have this understanding, have this better understanding of what it actually is, they'll feel more confident in having conversations with their staff, not being afraid to offend them at all. I think that's paramount. Number one, making sure that there's a higher percentage of people nationally who understand what it is.
Yeah, definitely. And Irfan, you produced this guideline. I know you are a very experienced academic, both in teaching and also researching as well. Has this work sparked any research interest or projects for you in the intersection of physical education and cultural inclusivity so far?
Yeah, okay. So there's quite a few areas now for development. And
Right.
I think since this has now been published and has been implemented in the schools, I think the next step now for research in the area is to look at, number one, speaking with schools. Again, I mentioned earlier case study approach here. And it's almost like a deep dive into schools to see how has their practice been adapted during the month of Ramadan, and also what has the uptake of physical activity, or PE shouldn't change, but what has that been
Right.
like? Sports activity, physical activities within the school. Has there been any remarkable difference? And the reason why I say that, I'm going to give you two examples of a couple of schools who I've already been listening to, because of course before I go into researching it and writing and gathering that data, you always like to kind of do a little bit of a litmus test or a field test to gauge what's currently going on, what's the picture looking like.
Yeah.
And interestingly, there was this school or a few schools who were looking at their extracurricular timetable, and they followed my guidance, and they said, right, we're going to have a student-centered approach where they talk to the students and say, what do you want this to look like? Not your PE curriculum, but your extracurricular program. How do you want it to work? And some of the students at the school, they all came together and they said, right, so what we want to do is we'd much rather have all of our extracurricular activities in the morning. So rather than have a breakfast club, we'll have like a yoga club or a stretching,
Right.
a wake up
That's
shake.
interesting to hear.
Yeah. Or we'll do table tennis at break time. And we'll do everything in the morning when we've got lots of energy. So before school, break time, and lunchtime, they'd use those three. And we call it, would front load the extracurricular program.
Right.
And then after school, they said we'd go to the mosque, then we'd go home, then they get ready for iftar, maybe they might sleep, have a nap for half an hour or 1 hour, and then they'd break their fast. So that was what one school did, and that was their practice, which was dictated by the students. A different school, their students wanted the reverse. They flipped it, and they said, sir, what we want is we want to backload our curriculum, our extracurricular program. So in the mornings, we're still quite tired. We want to reserve our energy or conserve our energy for the day. And then at the end of the school day, whatever we have left in the tank, we want to burn out. We want to blow out for 1 hour, 40 minutes. We want a high intensity activity just to release all of that energy, release all of that anxiety, and they want to blow all that energy away right at the end. Because then they know they haven't got any lessons left at school to concentrate on. They haven't got anything important to really focus on. They've got a little bit of energy left that they've saved during the day, and then they can use that energy up at the end. Then they'd go back home, maybe have a shower, and then they'd break their fast in the evening. So again, these are different real life examples that schools have done. And again, the key thing is that both of these examples have been driven by the student voice.
Right. And I think if you and I, we've done some research projects together, and, we will be working on certain projects together. I think there's a greater scope in kind of measuring the impact of this guideline as we're going along. Because now it's approaching its first anniversary fairly soon. And I know it has been launched in January, so but Ramadan now is coming in end of Feb. I think giving maybe for the next year, I don't know, this is just a kind of thought from my end, and I'm happy to start some work on this as well alongside you, is to kind of go to the schools that have implemented this guideline and kind of find out from the staff and the students' point of view how inclusive that was and how helpful it was, but also go to some of the schools that haven't yet started to implement it and speak to the students and staff there, and get that data and maybe just look into it from that point of view as well. So I think that would be a conversation we'll have fairly soon, inshallah. My last question, Irfan, would be is looking ahead now. You produced this guideline, you sparked the attention, and you being a spark person, in a light of everything, despite so many challenges and everything, and some of the feedback that you may have received and so on, and one of the one that I've certainly outlined about the weaponizing of the tool and so on, is now looking ahead. And I know you're kind of that person, you ignore the external negativity and you just pay attention and focusing on what you are doing. And mashallah, you are very calm in that sense. And I wish I had that calmness in me as well. And I often say to people, to be honest, like I say, I worked with Ifi a lot and he mentored me for a long time. And one of the things he hasn't taught me during the mentorship is sometimes to take a break. And I do say sometimes, and he hasn't taught me maybe one of the things, like his coolness in the situation, because I'm quite like we work quite differently, and I'm like sometimes I get a bit of a impatience and say, okay, what's the results? Okay, if you have this challenge, this is the solution. Go away with it. Whereas you are kind of sometimes letting it go. So, what's your vision for the future of these guidelines, and how would you like to see the guideline evolve, and what impact do you hope that it will continue to have on people?
So I think, first of all, the main thing I think you're quite right is the reason why I wrote this piece is because there was a call from those working in the education sector. It was like a cry for help on this area because they desperately needed something there that they could follow and they could rely and depend on. And now they have that. They have that here within this country. My next steps are now to look abroad because there are countries abroad who are delivering the national curriculum. And let's say, for example, within the Middle East, where you've got a number of Muslim countries and a high percentage who are all fasting. There's a few international schools who are delivering the English curriculum over there. There's a few international schools who have contacted me, and now they are looking to have this guidance implemented over there. Now, the nature of PE over there is very different to PE over here. If you imagine in 40-degree heat, then one of the best activities for the kids or for the students is swimming. Number one, because it's great exercise, but number two, it's also a good way of keeping cool during the heat. But again, does that mean that you just stop swimming during Ramadan? And again, this is a typical conversation because here we have, one or two leisure centres within each town or city. Over there, that every school has a swimming pool, and therefore they are swimming every single day. Should they stop swimming during Ramadan? What does that look like? Why is that happening? And again, it's training and educating the staff to make sure that they're confident in delivering what they deliver over there. So that's the next step to see where we go next. Abroad, internationally with the guidance, there's already links and contacts who are very keen to have me over and to do some CPD work with the staff over there. But again, I think the next step is also to see we've kind of managed to tick off education here, and there will be another iteration of it, version 2, version 3, with updates that come out, and this is going to be a forever rolling thing. But I think the next steps are going to be how can we answer the call for help from the public sector next? Right. How can we support them? So the education team, the workforce have got something in place here. How can I produce something for them? And how can I get it out to them? That's going to be the next step. And that's going to take another methodical approach, like I did with this one, where I had a stakeholder event and I got all of the key around the table, and we had a conversation as to what is this going to look like? What is the need? Again, the same questions will go to the new public sector and the public force, and just say, right, what are the issues that you're facing, and let me see how I can tackle those. So those are the two next steps. They're not small steps either. They're very big steps. So yeah, that's where I'm at.
Irfan, whatever the next step may be, we can only wish you the best and for the support. I think you are doing a great job. I know writing a guideline, then promoting it with all the busy life that you lead. It's never easy, but it has been appreciated. It has been well received, and there's a need for it, and you can fulfill that need. That's your contribution to the community and the wider society. We're certainly proud of you, and I think you should also be proud of yourself. You achieved a lot, and given that your contribution to the society is well appreciated. Thank you for whatever you're doing next, and we hope to be part of it, and we hope we'll have another discussion fairly soon. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.